Have you ever felt completely out of control of your own life? Like the decisions you make, the impulsive purchases, the self-sabotaging relationships, the destructive outbursts, don't actually belong to you? For over a century, we've been walking around convinced that our ego, our conscious self, is the undisputed master of our fate. We believe our reason, logic, and willpower are the riders guiding the horse of our existence. But Sigmund Freud, the father of psychoanalysis, called this conviction the greatest deception of the human mind. He documented a terrifying pattern. When life spirals into chaos, when careers implode, relationships burn, and mental peace vanishes, it's not a failure of character. It's the ego collapsing under the pressure of three warring, invisible forces. Today, we are peeling back the veil of your conscious mind to reveal the three secret saboteurs that Freud identified as the true architects of self-destruction: the id, the superego, and the beleaguered ego itself. We will uncover what happens when the precarious balance between these forces shatters, and how recognizing this collapse is the only way to regain the reins of your own destiny. This is not a theoretical discussion. This is a manual for understanding the internal civil war that is currently running your life and how to finally win it. The first invisible force is the id, the it. Freud called it the dark, inaccessible part of our personality, the great reservoir of all our primordial instincts. The id operates entirely on the pleasure principle, demanding immediate, total, and unconditional gratification of every impulse without regard for reality, logic, or morality. It is the infantile core that never grows up. Imagine the id as a colossal, powerful warhorse within you. It doesn't care if you have a job interview tomorrow. If it craves pleasure, sex, food, instant gratification, it demands it now. It is the voice that whispers, or rather screams, "Take it, eat it, break it, run away." But the id is not just fueled by the life instinct, eros, the energy that drives creation and connection, libido. It also houses its dark twin, the death instinct, Thanatos. This is the subconscious drive toward self-destruction, aggression, and a return to an inorganic, tension-free state. This is the ultimate terrifying secret of the id. It isn't just seeking pleasure. A profound part of it is seeking obliteration. When the ego collapses, the id is the first to burst through. It manifests as uncontrollable impulse control issues, addiction, risky financial gambles, explosive rage, and the terrifying repetitive cycle of self-sabotage that leads you back to the pain you swore you'd escape. You are not a bad person. You are a person whose rational rider has been unseated by the raw, consuming power of the id. Opposing the hedonistic anarchy of the id is the second force, the superego, the over-I. If the id is the devil on your shoulder, the superego is the tyrannical angel, but one fueled by shame, guilt, and the impossible pursuit of perfection. The superego forms in childhood as we internalize the rules, prohibitions, and moral standards of our parents and society. It splits into two parts: the conscience, which punishes the ego with guilt for wrongdoing, and the ego ideal, an unrealistic, unattainable image of perfection. The superego doesn't operate on reality. It operates on moral perfection. When the ego weakens, the superego doesn't help. It turns on you, becoming the ultimate inner critic. This collapse manifests as crippling anxiety, chronic guilt that you can never quite name, and an insidious belief that you are fundamentally unworthy of happiness or success. The superego ensures that even when you achieve great things, you feel compelled to find a way to punish yourself, often through self-sabotaging acts that align you with the crushing burden of guilt and inadequacy. While the I destroys you with action, the superego destroys you with judgment and the crushing weight of impossible moral standards. The ego, the I, is the third force and the most tragic. It is the part of the mind that represents reason and common sense. Its job is to mediate, to navigate reality, and to find a way to satisfy the id's demands in a manner acceptable to the superego and the external world. It operates on the reality principle. Freud famously described the ego's position as like a man on horseback who has to hold in check the superior strength of the horse, with this difference that the rider tries to do so with his own strength while the ego uses borrowed forces. But the ego is under constant, agonizing pressure from three sides: driven by the id, relentlessly pushing for immediate gratification; confined by the superego, relentlessly threatening with guilt and self-condemnation; and repulsed by reality, the external world constantly telling it no. The ego collapse is the moment this mediator runs out of strength, a concept modern psychology calls ego depletion. When the ego is depleted by chronic stress, unresolved trauma, or constant internal conflict, it loses its ability to test reality, regulate impulses, and employ sophisticated coping mechanisms. The rider falls off the horse, and the life you built begins to self-destruct as the id and the superego take over. When the id gains supremacy, the collapse manifests as pure, unfiltered impulsivity. This is the core of self-sabotage. You've set a major life goal, a new fitness routine, financial independence, a healthy relationship. Yet, at the crucial moment, an inexplicable force compels you to do the exact opposite. You know better, you feel the logical choice, but you act on the primal urge anyway. This is the id overriding the depleted ego. Financial ruin. The id demands instant pleasure, overriding the ego's logic about future security. You buy things you don't need, racking up debt, because the pain of delayed gratification is too immense. Relationship chaos. The id demands constant, novel stimulation, overriding the ego's commitment to loyalty and stability. This leads to reckless infidelity, needless drama creation, or abandoning a good partner out of sudden boredom. The compulsion to repeat trauma. Thanatos. Freud noted that people unconsciously recreate painful situations. This isn't coincidence, it's the death instinct, Thanatos, acting through the id, compelling the ego to return to a state of painful familiarity, a destructive comfort zone. You become a prisoner of your immediate wants, ensuring that long-term satisfaction is always just out of reach. If the id's victory is impulsivity, the superego's victory is paralyzing self-judgment. When the ego collapses, it can no longer filter the superego's moral mandates, leading to psychological terror. This collapse manifests as a relentless, unforgiving inner critic. Every mistake, every flaw, every moment of perceived weakness is met with a tidal wave of guilt and self-contempt. The superego whispers, "You are a fraud. You don't deserve this." If they knew the truth about you, they would leave. This fury drives two major destructive patterns. Impossible perfectionism. The ego ideal takes over, demanding an unrealistic standard that guarantees failure. You endlessly delay starting a project, procrastination, because the gap between your ideal and reality is too terrifying to bridge. Self-punishment. The conscience becomes so dominant that it actively seeks to punish the ego. People unconsciously arrange for their own downfall, sabotaging a job interview, picking a fight right before a happy event, or creating drama to draw external criticism that validates their internal guilt.
This external punishment temporarily relieves the internal pressure of the superego. You become the judge, jury, and executioner of your own life, ensuring that genuine self-acceptance is impossible.
When the ego is collapsing, its last-ditch effort to manage the overwhelming anxiety is to fire off powerful, yet toxic, defense mechanisms. These are unconscious maneuvers to distort reality and protect the ego from the terrifying demands of the id and superego. While defenses are sometimes necessary, in a state of ego collapse, they become maladaptive, creating a destructive feedback loop. Projection. This is the most damaging. The ego takes an unacceptable impulse from the id or a terrible judgment from the superego and puts it onto someone else. I'm not angry and aggressive. You are aggressive. I'm not attracted to that. You are being tempting. This destroys relationships by creating enemies where none exist. Denial. Blocking external reality entirely. You refuse to see the truth about your job, your partner, or your health, living in a fantasy that prolongs the inevitable catastrophe. Rationalization. Inventing logical excuses for purely instinctual, destructive behavior. The ego desperately tries to appear reasonable, masking the true id-driven impulse beneath a veneer of false logic. I cheated because my partner neglected me, instead of, I cheated because my id demanded immediate selfish gratification. These defenses don't solve the conflict. They move the war zone from your psyche to your external life.
A collapsing ego often reverts to the oldest, deepest, and most unresolved conflicts of your life, the Oedipus complex. This is the ultimate root of many destructive relationship patterns. Freud theorized that in childhood we develop a deep attachment to the parent of the opposite sex and view the parent of the same sex as a rival. While this conflict is usually resolved, leading to the formation of the superego, its unresolved echo drives many adult choices. When the ego collapses, it stops engaging with reality and instead seeks the familiarity of the original emotional dynamic. You compulsively seek partners who are emotionally unavailable, like a distant parental figure, or controlling, like an overpowering parental figure. You subconsciously orchestrate scenarios where you are betrayed or abandoned, not because you want pain, but because your psyche is trying to remaster or finally resolve the original overwhelming pain of childhood. Your partner isn't a person. They are an emotional ghost from the past, and you are sacrificing your present happiness to replay a script that the collapsed ego cannot let go of. The goal of psychoanalysis is not to destroy the id or silence the superego. That is impossible. The goal is to strengthen the ego's resilience and capacity to mediate. We must make the unconscious conscious. How do you rebuild the collapsed rider? Identify the saboteurs, naming the voices. You must learn to distinguish the voices. Id voice, immediate, selfish, non-negotiable demand. Quit now. Eat all of it. Send that angry text. Superego voice, shaming, absolute, judgmental. You are worthless. You must suffer. You can never forgive yourself. By naming them, the ego separates itself from the chaos. Delay gratification. Ego exercise. The fastest way to rebuild ego strength is by consciously delaying the id's demands. Not denying, but delaying. If the id screams, "Buy it now," the ego says, "I hear you, but we will wait 24 hours. This small act of resistance forces the ego to reclaim its role as the manager of the id. Negotiate with the superego. Reality check. The superego deals in extremes. The ego must introduce reality. When the superego screams, "You are a failure," the ego intervenes with a factual statement. I am not a failure. I failed at this one task, but I succeeded at 3 others this week. The ego brings balance and truth to the moral tyranny. Accept ambiguity. A strong ego can tolerate anxiety and uncertainty. It knows that life is rarely perfect, superego, or instantly gratifying, id. The power of the conscious mind is its ability to say, I feel intense anxiety right now, but I will not act on it. I will sit with the feeling.
Freud's final message is not one of doom, but of profound hope. The civil war in your psyche is a natural, unavoidable part of being human. The tragedy is not the conflict itself, but the unconsciousness with which we live through it. When the ego collapses, it is a desperate call for help from the very core of your being. It is the moment the forces you have suppressed, denied, and rationalized demand to be seen. Your job is not to become perfect. Your job is to make the unconscious conscious. Do not allow the id's selfish impulsivity to steal your future. Do not allow the superego's tyrannical guilt to steal your present peace. Your ego is the agent of your freedom, but it needs training, recognition, and constant defense. Action step 1. Journaling the saboteurs. For the next week, write down every instance of self-sabotage. Next to it, identify the force. Was it a primal immediate urge, ID, or was it a self-punishing, guilt-driven act, superego? Naming the force drains its power. Action step 2. Stop projecting. When you feel intense anger or judgment towards someone, pause. Ask yourself, where have I seen this trait in myself? Am I projecting my own unacceptable impulse onto them? This single act can revolutionize your relationships. Action step 3. Honor the mediator. Give your ego rest. Chronic depletion makes you vulnerable. Prioritize sleep, reduce unnecessary stressors, and practice true self-care. Not the impulsive kind the id wants, but the sustaining kind the ego needs. The true work of freedom is not changing the world around you, but changing the relationship between the forces inside you. When you reclaim the rider's seat, you reclaim your life. If this deep dive into the inner conflict resonates with you, it means your conscious mind is fighting back. Share your experiences in the comments below. Tell us which force, ID or superego, has been running your life. Subscribe for more psychoanalytic insights into the hidden architecture of your mind.